monitoring and evaluation plan. I like to actually think of it as a monitoring, evaluation, and learning plan, because of course the main purpose of doing monitoring is to learn about the impacts of our work so that we can improve our practice and deliver higher impact projects. But this again will pre-populate from your logic model, and it's where you map out how you're going to measure the progress you're making on each level of your program. And this is really important for our own purposes in implementing projects, to understand whether our theory of change or our hypothesis that we mapped out in the logic model is holding true, right? So does the training we're delivering result in new knowledge and skills? And how are we going to test or measure whether people have learned new knowledge and skills? Do the new knowledge and skills result in changes in behavior or practice? And how are we going to measure and find out whether new behaviors and practices are taking place? It also maps out some targets. So what are you hoping to see that you can measure yourself against? What tools will you need to be able to do that monitoring work? Who will be responsible for it? When will it take place? And then also, I think key, who will you be reporting to? So once you have done some monitoring, you've collected some data that shows you're either achieving your results or not, who are you going to share that information with? How are you going to review it as a team? Are you going to share it with stakeholders? Are you going to share it with your funders or donors? How much, I've got a little line here. The other piece too is the budget. So this can help you populate your budget this year for at the very bottom where you've got monitoring and evaluation. But here again, this will populate with the outcomes at the intermediate outcome level. If you recall, when we were talking about the logic model, we talked about how the ultimate outcome is not really going to be achievable. It's more the vision that sets the tone to help you develop your program. Most funders are not going to look for you to be measuring progress towards that in an overall way. But you will want to develop some indicators for your intermediate level, your immediate level, and your outputs. And here you go. Here you see that something different output, again, already pre-populated. So indicators. Your indicators are, go back to that plan here. Indicators are the word we use for your realistic, measurable markers of progress. So what are the things you're going to look at to make sure that you are achieving what you set out to achieve? They're mapped to your outputs and your outcomes. When you're thinking through what your indicators are, I urge you to be realistic and think carefully about what is going to be possible to measure and how you can measure things in a way that's going to be easy and produce data that is easy to understand. For some indicators, you may have a baseline already, so you may already know, say how, if it's an education program, you already know how many children are in school in that community, and you may want to, so you may be trying to support more students in being able to attend school. You may have a baseline already. If you're talking about knowledge and skills change, it's really difficult to have a baseline that pre-exists your project. So you might set up an indicator or in your monitoring plan to say, do a survey for trainings, for example. I really like keep it simple. Do a survey before you deliver the training. If you can, do a survey with the people you intend to train before you finalize the training itself, so that you can make sure you're adapting the training to be meeting their specific needs or gaps in knowledge and skills. And then do a survey after training and see if you can see a difference in how they answer those questions based on the new knowledge they've developed through the training. Okay, and you can use that as an indicator and show progress. at the immediate outcome level. At the output level, indicators are very easy. Output level indicators are really about things being completed. So if you have, using the training example, you might have an indicator that says, 40 women attend a small business training, and you use your attendance sheet to say, yep, in fact, 41 women attended that training. Done. Okay. This second example, CAP scores, that's the survey example that I use. A CAPS survey is just a fancy word for the kinds of surveys you probably already would envision for trainings. It's just a knowledge, attitudes, and practices survey. What tools are you going to use to collect your data? Are you going to use surveys? Are you going to use interviews? Are you going to use focus groups? Are you going to be looking at, attendance records, as I said, at the output level? And I think it's important to make a note too, if you already have a tool that you can just use, or do you have to develop it? Because if you have to develop it, you want to note that, because you're going to want to make sure you're allowing time to do that before you need it, right? Because that is a piece of work that you'll need to do. When are you going to collect the data? How often you're going to collect the data? Make sure that's very, very clear. I think I don't want to make assumptions about anyone's practice or your projects or your organizations. Obviously, I assume there's varying levels of experience and capacity, but I will say that generally speaking, monitoring and evaluation is something we don't do very well as a sector. I think it's the piece that is most likely to be forgotten or just dispensed with if we're under time pressure or stress, or in any way feeling overstretched. I think it's very important not to drop the ball on monitoring and evaluation, not because of the funders, but because of ourselves. I know I personally find it incredibly motivating when I'm involved in a project and I can see the results are coming true. I find that to be really motivating, and it makes me feel good about what I'm doing, and it makes me want to continue. I also think it's so important because of the contract, the social contract that we make with communities when we're doing this kind of work, that we are checking our practice and making sure that we are in fact delivering what we promise and creating the kinds of change we want to see. Obviously, we're all in this work because we want to contribute to positive change. So I think it's very important that we make sure for ourselves that we are in fact doing that, so that we can feel confident in moving forward. Of course, having good monitoring and evaluation is going to help you get funding. It's also going to help keep your funders and donors and community stakeholders. So you might be local government officials, village headmen, for example, who you want to make sure can see the tangible results that you're creating in communities so that they want to support your work as well. So please make sure you keep focus on this. What's very helpful, of course, is to be including this in your budget, right? So if you've got this included in your budget, you've got it included in your critical path, it's much more likely to take place as you're going about the business of implementing the project. So the responsibility, who's going to create the tool that you're using for data collection, who's collecting the data, who's going to do the analysis and the sharing of results. And here's an example. CAP survey created by the project officer, implemented by trainers, and then compiled for analysis by your project officer. And then who are you going to share the results with? I think the tendency when I see these filled out with partners through CAP Network, but also my other clients, is that it's often they only list the funder. This is not for the funder, right? This is for us. So when you say, who are you sharing the results with? You might say, in our monthly team meetings, we are going to look at these results as a team. You might say, with our community stakeholders, with our implementing partner, with the trainer who delivered the training so that they can see whether their training was effective. And the funder, of course, should be included in there. But please don't ever just think of this as something you're doing for someone else. Please think of this as something you're doing for yourselves and for your partners and your communities first and foremost. And I think everyone will appreciate seeing the impact of what you're doing, because they're also engaged, right? They've also taken time out of their life. They're contributing to the project by showing up and by being partnered and engaged with you. So it's really important to remember to share those results with them too. In fact, I would say first and foremost.